Hello and welcome to a guide on building and playing hunters. Information on what the role requires, how to build them, and then how to put it all into practice. Perfect for new players who want to understand what hunters are all about. Before we go on, if you like anything that you see here and would like to support the channel, please like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you a penny, it allows me to grow, and if you don't like it, you can always unsubscribe later. So, hunters are the role that do high amounts of consistent single target damage, excelling especially in the late game. It's all on your shoulders from here, buddy. Good luck, we're all counting on you. In teamfights, your job is to kill priority enemy targets, but this also makes you a target for the enemy, so be careful. As a hunter, you want to position yourself where you can do the most damage, but remember, you can't do any damage when you're dead, unless you're Scylla, because she definitely needed a buff to her damage output. What I mean by this is that you should be in every teamfight where possible, but if you are out of position, you'll likely be the first to die, so don't be stood at the front of a fight taking damage, because you can't take much of it. Because hunters can do high, consistent target damage, in Conquest your team will be looking at you to clear objectives and structures, meaning that if you hear the call to take an objective such as Fire Giant or Gold Fury, stop what you're doing and get over there, because you'll take it down quicker than anyone else. And speaking of Conquest, a hunter's job is very straightforward. Stay in your lane early, farming minions, until you start to hit hard enough to be effective in teamfights, but then remember that you need to be in them all. Basically, don't try and gank someone at level 3, and don't still be farming at level 18. Building hunters is a huge point of contention between new players and toxic assholes. No role will see people question your build more than if you buy one item that's wrong to the asshole in the lobby. Like a bat signal, he'll spot it a mile off. So, let's learn to keep them quiet and let them find another reason why they're 0 and 7. Before we go into how to build hunters, we need to divide all hunters into two groups: ability based hunters and attack based hunters. Now obviously all hunters do damage with both abilities and basic attacks, but some gods' abilities mean that they will rely on this over the other as their primary source of damage. For example, Rama's entire kit revolves around buffing his basic attacks, which makes him a basic attack reliant god, whereas Neith or Skadi have abilities that can do huge amounts of damage, so they're less reliant on their basics for an output of damage, and they are more ability based. The difference between the type of hunter you are playing will affect your build. Before we start, here's a quick rundown of some of the terms when building to help. Penetration ignores enemy protections and allows you to damage tankier gods, and it can really hurt late game weaker gods. It comes in two forms, percentage and flat. In the description below there's a link to a guide I made on protections and penetration if you'd like to see more. Attack speed is the speed that your basic attacks come out. It caps at 2.5 and it can be found any time in the game here. Critical hits do double damage and is how you kill mages in 2 shots. This is signified by a red marker around the damage numbers, and it can go right up to 100% crit chance. Lifesteal restores your health after you do damage. Cooldown reduces the cooldown of your abilities and caps at 40%. Finally, power controls the strengths of all of your basic attacks and abilities. Now, all hunters will need power, penetration and some form of lifesteal to give you some sustain. But gods who are reliant on their basic attacks, you will want to increase your attack speed and build items that have effects that are activated by landing a basic attack, and also possibly critical hit if that's what the game requires. For ability based gods, you'll be less reliant on attack speed and more reliant on your abilities, so you'll need mana, cooldown reduction and just raw power to boost the damage on your attacks. Now that we have divided hunters into two categories, we can begin to look at the principles when building hunters. So here's some simple steps to follow. Firstly, very few hunters have healing in their kit, so sustain can be a big problem. One hit from an enemy mage ability and you're likely nearly dead, and it's back to base where your damage output is 0, and that's exactly what the enemy wants. It's therefore very common to build at least one lifesteal item into your build to allow you to heal from minions or jungle camps or enemies that you hit, and preventing you from having to back or rely on allied healing, or I guess impeccable defensive movement. So as a general rule, if your god is basic attack reliant, Devourer's Gauntlet is a very good and very common item. Although it takes stacks to rack up, when it's full it gives you a lot of power, lifesteal and means that you'll have enough sustain in the late game. If you are ability based and therefore likely to be buying Transcendence as your stacking item, Assy is a good alternative. It doesn't require stacks and it offers a bit of penetration too. The reason I said as your stacking item is because buying more than one is ill-advised. It slows down your build and means that you have to spend more time farming. So don't buy both Transcendence and Devourer's Gauntlet, it's usually one or the other. Tip 2 is to not try and generalise your build. After 3 items, usually a starter item, boots, and then your stacking item, you have a choice of which of the key stats you want to specialise in. Crit, lifesteal, attack speed, or penetration. They're all very useful on hunters, but not if you try and get all 4 into your build. A build with a little bit of each will likely struggle to do consistent damage or not be specialised enough for the needs of the team. Normally I pick 2 and build into them depending on the enemy team, the god I'm playing, and the current game situation. If the enemy has a lot of squishy characters, crit chance allows you to burn them down quickly with just a few attacks, but crit can be countered by items, enemy passives, or enemy protections. Lifesteal allows you to stay in fights longer and therefore do more damage, but it can be countered by anti-heal, although I will say that a full lifesteal build is not recommended. Attack speed obviously allows you to basic attack much faster, but it has a cap of 2.5, and those basic attacks can be as fast as they want. If they aren't doing any damage, there's no point. Finally, penetration allows you to hit through enemy protections and shred tanks, but if you've only got a small amount of it, it will likely not make much of a difference. However, luckily, many of the items in Smite provide 2 or 3 of the key stats, so it's hard to get this truly wrong. Finally, there are a few items with unique passives that you can build into gods depending on the game situation. Kin Size does extra damage based on the enemy's maximum health, meaning that if you are facing enemy tanks with huge health pools, they will be perfect for taking them down. Executioner reduces the enemy protections by a percentage, and it can shred tanks. The beautiful thing about this is that the enemy protections are stolen for everybody, not just you, meaning that if you hit an enemy 3 times and fully stack the passive, then their protections are reduced for all attacks coming in. Golden Bow has a chain lightning effect which can help you clear waves and do extra damage in teamfights, and because it gives 40% attack speed, you can often get away with this being your main attack speed item. Toxic Blade has an anti-heal effect that applies when landing basic attacks. It can be perfect for stopping enemy healing. Fail Not, as well as having some great key stats, gives increased critical hit chance after casting your ultimate. So if you are playing as a god who engages with their ultimate, such as Medusa or Artemis, which will hold the enemy in place, consider if this will help you burn down enemies even quicker. Silver Branch Bow gives you power related to how far over the attack speed cap that you are. While it's not a common item, it can be useful on gods who have attack speed steroids in their own kits, such as Rama or Artemis, as activating it will give you a power boost. Finally, we move on to playing hunters. Playing hunters is both very easy and very difficult. In principle, just land your abilities and basic attacks, build the right way, and be there when your team needs you, and you'll be absolutely fine. But staying alive when playing such a squishy character can be tough. No role will teach you positioning better than a hunter. Keep in mind that you will be the priority target for the enemy, so expect damage to come your way. You need to stay close to your support and make sure that you kill the priority enemy targets. As a hunter, you want to be killing the enemy mage, assassin and hunter, since you will be able to take them down the quickest. Tanks will often be in your face, zoning you out of the fight. It's difficult to avoid temptation to just focus them, but be wary, this is often what they want you to do. Assess the situation and always attack the biggest threat to your team. With only a few exceptions, hunters excel in the late game. Therefore, your goal is to reach full build as quickly as possible. When playing Conquest, this means that you should be looking to farm quickly and efficiently. In the early game, you are pretty vulnerable, which is why the support stays with you in the early game. Just focus on clearing your waves and taking your nearby buffs. Also remember, keep this part of the jungle warded. The enemy jungler is looking for you to make a mistake and overextend. Don't let them get the drop on you. Try not to back in lane if there's a wave nearby. Keep a mental note of when buffs and camps are coming up, and never miss a chance to take a tower, Gold Fury or Fire Giant. If you do get a few levels ahead of the enemy, oh boy, watch the damage that you do to them. And if you don't, just blame the support and throw out the surrender vote. When the game hits the mid to late stage, you need to be at those team fights. A constant frustration for many players is a huge teamfight happening in mid or at Fire Giant, and the Hunter is still farming waves in left lane, completely oblivious to what's going on, despite already being ahead. That advantage means nothing if it's used on minions. You only hit level 20 once. So that brings the guide to a close, as I didn't want it to go on too long. I hope you learnt something from it. Here's my Twitch on screen if you'd ever like to come and see me play. I do regular play-alongs and regular live streams. Thanks very much for watching, and good luck out there.